Hi everyone, Scootany Scoot Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Young Thug album, UY SCUTI. Here we have the newest full-length LP from game-changing Atlanta rapper, singer, songwriter, Young Thug, aka Jeffrey Williams. Someone who was on a hugely influential run for years, one there was seemingly no end to, because to this day we still hear the impact and influence of his biggest 2010s mixtapes where he forged his eccentric and elastic vocal style. He then finished the 2010s with some of his biggest and best projects to date, like So Much Fun in 2019. And around this time as well, artists on his YSL label were really starting to build up their own careers. And the label was also making more moves as a whole, like in 2021, where we got the second installment of the Slime Language series. But all of this growth and progress unfortunately came crashing down pretty quickly, as just a few years later, numerous YSL affiliates, including Thugger, were wrapped up in a massive RICO case, which lasted to the end of 2024. Now, there were also a few indicted co-defendants whose cases are being tried separately at this time. And to bring this case to a close, there were actually quite a few stringent and controversial plea deals that were struck, most notably Gunna's, which entailed a statement that publicly qualified YSL as a gang, something that was pretty essential in terms of the state's case against them. And while Thugger himself is currently free, there are a lot of rules and expectations around what he does, who he talks to, where he goes at this time, including being unable to make gang references in his music, but obviously being able to escape the system, at least in part, and get back to making music again is a blessing, even if it's under less than ideal circumstances. However, those circumstances got even less ideal recently when documents and interrogation audio, as well as numerous jail calls, were leaked, obviously from when this RICO trial was still ongoing. And all this new information painted a very unflattering picture, not just in the eyes of anyone with concerns around snitching, but those phone calls also saw Thugger backbiting numerous figures around the industry, some of whom he was pretty close with at one time, and it just left him looking very duplicitous. In the midst of all of this audio, there was also a damning admission of Thugger spending $50K on botting some streams for Gunna's DS Forever project. So again, all this info, not a great look, and all of it coming out had Thugger going into full damage control mode. To an extent, it felt almost like he wasn't just doing PR for himself, but the music scene he came out of at large too, because this story was like really sending shockwaves through the Atlanta music scene. And at the time, it was clear he didn't really know what exactly to do, so he did all of it. He did tweets, he did songs, he did even a dramatic 3-hour-long interview with Atlanta-based entrepreneur and rapper Big Bank, which was just a complete mess of a conversation that maybe it would have been worth it to kind of wait on. I mean, a few days ago, Young Thug also went on a new Pivot podcast appearance where the conversation generally, comparing it to that Big Bank convo, was much more measured, cool, calm, collected, self-aware. Regardless, though, that conversation with Bank, I guess in a way it was effective in some fashion, because it did lead to a lot of viral clips that were just shared widely across the internet, and I think kind of, lowered the temperature around the situation with Young Thug in the immediate moment, because they were just like so much ridiculous and funny and preposterous bits and segments. So for a moment, the internet fervor had died down, but still recently Young Thug, in the wake of this album dropping, has been tweeting, just expressing a lot of sadness, worries around losing people who may have been close with him at some point in time. And look, I'll say from the outset, I do not envy Jeffrey's position on this new record here at all. Having to come back and instill faith in your fans after, having been out of the studio for so long is obviously difficult. Then add on top of that your entire reputation getting turned inside out for the world to see. Overcoming that challenge is something that I'm sure most people watching this video would utterly fail at doing. So again, it's a difficult task Young Thug has been faced with here. However, I do think an album that is as good and as focused and as punchy as Jeffrey or Slime Season could do it, could make a dent, could make a difference. But unfortunately, for the most part, I think UY SCUTI just feels like another chapter of the ongoing Young Thug PR campaign cleanup. Because just like the internet circus we were witnessing on social media in regards to all this just weeks ago, it still doesn't seem like Jeffrey knows how exactly he wants to play all of this. Is he wanting to move on and turn a new leaf? Is he dwelling on everything that has happened over the past year? Is he sorry for everything that he's done and taking ownership? Or is he kind of passing blame and vowing revenge? On some level, I'm sure he's feeling a mix of all of these feelings, but he doesn't really seem to be able to balance or make sense of them all at the moment. Take, for example, the opening track on this thing, Ninja, a track whose introduction kind of sounds like we are hearing audio of a prosecutor talking about how dangerous Jeffrey is and how he runs his gang from the inside using stuff like FaceTime calls, and if he were to get out on bond, there would be witnesses that would potentially be in danger, which is a pretty startling thing to open your record with, considering just like how much the portrayal of YSL as a gang was kind of central to the case you just went through to begin with. What unfolds from here on this track is like a really grim trap banger where Thugger swaps out his usual dynamic and delivery, which again, typically very melodic, very expressive, for something that's a lot more aggressive and raspy, blunt, and frankly just doesn't really have the punch or pizzazz of his usual style, his usual sound. And he even starts repeatedly hard R-ing his ops in a way that just kind of comes across very unserious and like he's just kind of doing it for shock value, which, I mean, the cover also kind of feels like he's just doing this for shock value too. And deeper into the track list, there are more attempts at dropping aggressive trap cuts. But again, Young Thug just doesn't really seem to have the vocal presence or commanding performance to really make songs in this style hit. Whether it's Yuck, or whether it's I'm So Dope, or whether it's Revenge, or Fucking Told You, whose tempo is way too slow. There's also the shamefully cringe Whoop-De-Doo, which seems like yet another try at just capitalizing off of one of the viral moments to come out of the Big Bank interview. The track just also features one of the many gutless production choices across this record too. This whole project here, just to lay it out, is 21 tracks and 77 minutes long, and it's not just simply an explosive return, because a lot of the runtime on this record is spent recovering, understandably, from the ordeal that Jeffrey has just been through. And I will say, tracks in this vein lead to some of the most convincing and standout moments on SCUTI, whether we're talking about pockets of On the News, or Catch Me I'm Falling, which is very much like an inner monologue type track, where Young Thug is going over a lot of the lowest lows of his time with his lawyer, spent dealing with the trial, whether he's talking about people who are close to him, turning regrets that he had at the time, fears that he had looking at a very lengthy sentence. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just one side of many sides of a massive story, but it's still compelling nonetheless. There's also Blaming Jesus, which is not one of my top tier favorites on the record, but I still think that Thugger's vocal delivery on this one sees him playing more toward his strengths than maybe some other tracks. There's also Sad Spider 2, which is an interesting highlight, which it's clear off of how passionate and expressive he is on this song that he is dealing with a lot of dark and intense feelings, but might not necessarily have all of the language or perspective to process every piece of it at this moment. And I also have to make mention of the 7-minute closing track, I Miss My Dogs, which was a highly discussed moment in the lead up to this album, as it was dropped as a single and as a music video. And one would think, given the title, that Young Thug is essentially going to go over every single instance of someone separating themselves from him as a result of everything that happened because of the trial, because of the leaks. But a majority of the song is actually spent more apologizing, first off, to Mariah the Scientist, his partner, his significant other, for everything he put her through due to his personal choices and this case. Also thanking Drake for supporting him in the midst of all of this, and furthermore wanting to smooth things over between him and Metro Boomin, which, I mean, good luck with that. He also shout-outs people like 21 Savage for essentially staying solid with him. He talks about wanting to reconnect with Lil Baby as well, which I imagine on some level that went okay, or must have happened on some level, given that Lil Baby is included on this record. He does have a feature on here. Presumably that feature is recent and or totally and 100% approved. I mean, I presume that to be the case with all the features on this record, but still, with that being said, all the appearances across this very lengthy track list on some level do feel a little bit like an extension of the PR campaign, an attempt at painting Thugger's world as maybe not being so lonely, or as lonely as he seems to say it is, either in tweets or in interviews, conversations. To be honest, I would say only maybe a few of the features in the midst of this track list come across as totally locked in, energetic, and memorable. Those being Lil Baby's, 21 Savage's, even to an extent, Sexy Red. As awkward as Mommy is, I mean, it is clear that Sexy Red fully ran with the assignment on her feature and dropped a very unhinged and raunchy verse. But outside of that, some of the other appearances across the record are either forgettable or maybe even tough listens. Mariah the Scientist, for example, on this record sounds shockingly passionless, especially on the track Invest Into You, where the singing and rapping between her and Thugger is stiff. There is no chemistry. And again, even appearances from the likes of Travis Scott feel very run-of-the-mill. You also have Money on Money with Future, which is a track that's been around for a minute now and just kind of sees Future popping in after this completely out-of-nowhere transition. Like, it's a very lopsided, weakly structured track. Not to mention Cardi B, who doesn't even really seem to fit into the theme of the song that she places into. But yeah, unfortunately, this thing is just kind of a mess. Not really the strong return I was hoping for from Young Thug. Again, I give it to the more emotional and personal moments on the record where he really seems to be going over essentially the trials and tribulations of his court case. Those tracks come across as very emotional and genuine and sincere. Beyond that, nearly everything else that is trying to be ultra aggressive or, portray some kind of connection between Thugger and somebody else just feels like varying degrees of overcompensation, and also just showcases a lot of weak songwriting, unmemorable vocal performances, weak vocal performances where he's just really not at his best, and mediocre production choices as well, which is why I'm feeling a light to decent 3 on this album. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Young Thug, forever.